This is the Cycling Over 60 podcast, Season 2, Episode 44, A Social Justice Tool, and I'm your host, Tom Butler. Welcome, everyone. This is the place where I am having conversations with people who I think have something valuable to say about all kinds of topics related to cycling. I'm especially interested in learning how to get and stay fit later on in life. This is my journey to use cycling as a way of staying fit. Before I get to the conversation for this episode, here's a brief update on that journey. The Cycling Over 60 Strava Club National Senior Health and Fitness Challenge is about halfway through. Our goal is to hit a combined 3,500 miles. As of Thursday evening, we're at 1,537 miles, with 26 people participating. We have some work to do still, but the goal is definitely in reach. As a group, we have had 66 activities that have contributed to the total. It is definitely not too late for you to jump into the club and contribute. Just join the Cycling Over 60 Club on Strava and look for the post on May 23rd with all the details. I'm excited because I might actually break into the top 10 on the Cycling Over 60 Strava Club this week. I am doing a century ride this weekend, and I think that might get me there. I got some good news related to this season's challenge. If you are new to the podcast, my goal this season is to ride about 400 miles across the state of Washington on U.S. Bike Route 10. My plan is to leave on Thursday, September 12th from Anacortes, Washington, and end on Monday, September 16th in Newport, Washington. Now that I have decided on dates, I will put up a full route plan in a post in the Cycling Over 60 Strava Club soon. It would be great to have people join me on this ride. I do know there'd be some logistics to work out, but if you're interested, let me know. The good news that I got this week was from the North Cascades National Park. I had hoped to stay at New Halem Creek Campground. However, the park website stops taking reservations for the campsite on September 8th. After the 8th, the campsites are labeled, quote, out of season. I was able to get an email from the park that out of season means you can't make a reservation, but that the campground might still be open on a first-come basis. Since my wife Kelly will be supporting me, it should be easy for her to get there early. In addition to New Halem Creek, there is also Goodell Creek Campground only a mile away. Goodell Creek will be open, but there are no services. I'm really hoping that I'm going to be able to camp that first night. I think that that would be an awesome end of the day in a really beautiful place, but I'm going to have an alternative because there is a possibility that these campgrounds will be closed. A shout out to the awesome rangers at the North Cascades National Park Service Complex for doing such a great job answering my questions. We have come to the end of National Bike Month. I just have to say that I really enjoyed my conversations this month. This week, I was looking for a unique way to wrap up the month, and I started thinking about considering the bike from a different angle. In a number of conversations, people have talked about the value of the bike in low-income communities. So I looked around to find someone that could speak about the bike as a tool for social justice. I was really happy to find an organization nearby called Bikeworks that has just the focus I was looking for. Their executive director, Ed Ewing, joined me to talk about how they are impacting frequently overlooked neighborhoods in Seattle. My job this week was made really easy in that I just got to sit back and listen to all the interesting things Ed had to share. Here is our discussion. I'm excited to be talking today about a particular aspect of the bicycle, and I'm joined by Bikeworks Executive Director Ed Ewing. Thanks for being here, Ed.
Thank you, Tom. It's great to meet you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share about Bikeworks.
Yeah. This week wraps up National Bike Month, so today I want to talk about the bike as a social justice tool. And I see the efforts of Bikeworks in Seattle as evidence of the impact of the bicycle can have. Before we go there, Ed, what are your earliest memories of the bicycle?
Oh, goodness. What's coming to mind, too, one is the day I discovered balance. I didn't have training wheels, and my dad gave me a push on a bike that was a hand-me-down from my brother, my oldest brother. It was a Czechoslovakian bike of some sorts. And I don't know how we ended up with it, perhaps growing up in Minneapolis and its Slavic roots or whatever. We ended up with a Czechoslovakian bike, but it was mine. And I remember my dad, just after work and taking me to one end of the alley and just giving me a push. And I hit every trash can in the alley. And then a dog came out of the shadows barking at me, and I remember my dad kicked the dog away, and I was off, and it's a I'll never forget that day, just discovering balance and scared, and also I think I was crying and laughing at the at the same time. A lot of early childhood memories, and my parents were active cyclists. Just memories of when my brother and I were old enough to ride, just sitting in the baskets behind them and with our hands tucked in their belts and a lunch packed for the day, and we'd be going around the Twin Cities exploring the cities, the lakes and whatnot, and would stop for a picnic or check out a concert. And it's just really fond and good memories of the bike. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think about, that motivation when you're a kid and you're seeing
Mhm.
everybody else riding a bike and you're just so anxious for that day. And mine was the case, no training wheels, a bike too big for me, all that. But I was so motivated that despite, crashing, getting back on, going a little ways, crashing, getting back on, it's like, I'm going to stick with this. I'm going to make this work. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I think another memory is, my brother, when he went to college, we were very close, and he was at ROTC, Naval ROTC, and went off to college, and just processing being alone. And a lot of those summer days, that we would spend together, here I had, myself and the bike. And so I would set out in the city and just ride and explore. And as long as I kept the IDS tower, in sight, I knew how to get back to where I am. And I used that same technique when I moved here to Seattle in '88, new to the city. I had my bike, and I was like, well, as long as I can see the Space Needle, I know how to get back to the general vicinity of where I am. I just remember the sense of self, the sense of the efficacy, the grit, the sense of independence, of self-empowerment that I got from that. It really shaped and fuels me even today, just to be able to go places on your own power. Yeah.
and how are some of the ways that cycling has remained a part of your adult life?
It's really, I feel very lucky to have turned my passion into my career. When I moved to Seattle in '88, I was working for Honeywell and did the corporate path for 20 years. And the bike was always with me. I traveled quite a bit, and my territory was Washington, Northern Idaho, and Montana. And so during the summer months, I could pack my bike and take it with me to Spokane, Tri-Cities, or Missoula, or Billings, or wherever, Helena, and it was a way for me to exercise, to see the city, to think. It was a way to just process the day. And if you're going to be traveling that much, it was cheaper than the gym. And so it really is tracked with me. And I've started bike racing in the early '80s, and still to this day, participate in masters bike racing. And it's a way to stay fit. It's a way to stay, physically and mentally fit. It's a way to process for me. It's there's something about a cadence of 90 to 95 or 94 RPMs that just really helps me reset. And it's just a great way for me to exist. It's such a part of it. Some people have yoga, some people run, meditation. I mean, that's what it is for me. The bike, that's what the bike does for me.
Yeah, I've talked about before on here that there seems to be, you get in a rhythm and you keep that rhythm going for half an hour or whatever, uninterrupted out on a long ride. And to me feels like a bit of meditation. You're just kind
Hmm.
of in sync in a rhythm, and there's not a lot of distractions, especially if you're out on a trail in the wilderness or something. And yeah, it's really nice that
Hmm.
way.
I discovered exactly what that is called. A few years ago, I did some therapy, and my therapist suggested this type of therapy called EMDR, and it's where you revisit the trauma, and then they're through a rhythm in your eyes, looking back and forth, or tapping on your legs or on a table, or holding some paddles that gently will pulse, left, right at a certain cadence. And the way she explained this to me is that some people experience it running, some people experience it swimming, some people experience it biking. And when she said that, I just almost jumped out of my skin. I was like, that's it. That's what I get from biking. And it's that sweet spot of like 90 to 94 RPMs where I could sit there all day. And I notice you have the picture of poster of STP, the Seattle to Portland ride. I can't think of a better day than to spend all day on your bike just riding at that pace, eating, drinking, talking to people. It's just, for me, it's just bliss. It really, really is. But it took that association to go, okay, that's what it is. That's why I bike and why I process things, just life, work, relationships, whatever it might be. When I'm riding, I'm able to think about those things, reset, reposition, reframe, gain a deeper understanding through just that left pedal, right pedal, just the right brain, left brain motion. And it's just, I finally figured out what that was. And it's like, it's just something that naturally occurs, for a lot of people at a certain cadence or a certain rhythm.
Really fascinating for sure. Can
Hmm.
you talk a bit about Bikeworks, what goes on at Bikeworks, and then kind of what your personal experience and passions, that drew you to becoming a leader with an organization like Bikeworks?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Bikeworks has been around since 96. It was specifically founded with the intention to increase access to bicycling, specifically and intentionally in South Seattle. If anyone's familiar with Seattle, Seattle's a beautiful, beautiful city. It's also a very segregated city. Seattle's I believe, the fifth whitest city in the nation. And not all of those resources reach all communities. So communities like Rainier Beach, the Central District at that time, White Center, Tukwila, Skyway, a lot of those resources, the abundance of resources in this town don't reach those communities or reach those communities at a different level. And so something as simple as the bicycle, and we work with a lot of schools that have very high free reduced lunch percentages. So free reduced lunch program is those who need assistance with school lunch or breakfast or after school snack. They receive assistance from the school district, to purchase lunch. It's probably like 350, 375, maybe $4 a day. If there is a high need for free reduced lunch assistance, chances are there is not a lot of disposable income in that household. And so that reduces the access or the chances or the opportunity for either a youth or adult to get a bike. When the primary, focus is a rent or mortgage, is food, is education, safety. Having access to a bike and transportation is somewhat limited. So Bikeworks was founded on the premise of increasing access to bikes, and it's evolved into increasing access to bikes and social justice with a centering and focus of racial equity. Because the communities that we focus on in South Seattle, it's predominantly of color. Understanding the complexities, understanding the systemic racism of how Seattle and why Seattle looks like it does, where a lot of major cities are. Understanding that and using that and leveraging that and anchoring our efforts in that provides a deeper understanding of what's actually going on in these communities and what we can solve with a bicycle. And also, what are the larger conversations that come out of those discussions around the bicycle? South Seattle has two of the most dangerous streets in King County, and that's MLK and Rainier Avenue. And so, recently partnering with Cascade Bicycle Club and talking with the mayor and the mayor's staff and transportation advocates at Seattle Department of Transportation to really help shape the levy that's coming out, and to focus and prioritize the South End's needs for safety and the ability to recreate and access to transportation safely. We through the bike shop and through our youth and adult programs, we get 3,000 bikes a year into the hands of youth and adults, predominantly Black and brown youth and adults in South Seattle. So that's 3,000 lives a year. The stakes are high down here. It's a very real need. And we also feel that it's our responsibility to tell the bigger or the greater story of what's going on in these communities, why they look the way they look, and how we can change that. So it's the bike is just really the entry, and the bigger conversation is what's going on in these communities. That speaks to our mission statement of resilient communities, understanding what resilient means, and how can we influence that using our passion, the bicycle.
So I'm thinking that you had seen these issues before you came on board with Bikeworks. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what drew you to the organization, kind of your personal interests, kind of your personal passions.
Sure. Yeah, it's being involved in bike racing since I was 17. I was acutely aware that I was the only one of color. Oftentimes, even growing up in Minneapolis, through the support of my parents, and modeling their behavior, like seeing them ride a bike and normalize that type of activity for me. And my dad was an amazing golfer, and my brother is now. And seeing my parents do those two activities, it normalized that. And sure, there's basketball, track, football, but that's a lot of the exposure that especially youth of color receive is through basketball, track, football, those really accessible sports. And you see yourself doing those sports, but you don't really see yourself cycling at a professional level. You don't see yourself playing golf at a professional level. Or if it wasn't for like Lee Elder and Calvin Pete and those guys, it just would not have been, possible. It's, if you can see it, you can be it. And so, growing up bike racing and being around bikes, and just being in the bike racing world, which is predominantly white, I was acutely aware of my color, of the dynamic that was there. And it's something that I always wanted to change. And my attitude was, there's no one that can tell me I don't belong here. Believe me, there were plenty of efforts where that was the case. But I had the ability to unpack that with my parents. And they're very, very, very strong individuals. And taught my brother and I this, gave us a skill set to navigate through that and be successful in spite of that. And so the deeper I went into my career, I started focusing more and more on the professional development of people. I was a corporate trainer, both technical and sales trainer. I'm engaged with a lot of people. I started migrating away from the actual product and focusing more on the people. And then in 2000, early 2000, I was laid off, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I finally could figure out what exactly I wanted to do. I think, when you're in college, you're taught to go to college, get a degree, get a job, be successful. And especially in the Black community, it's like, get your education, get that college degree, get a job, work your way up the corporate ladder, buy a home, settle in, that sort of thing, buy land. And so for me, I followed that track for quite some time. And then in 2000, when I was laid off, I was very fortunate to get a year severance from an organization, and I raced my bike full time. It was a wonderful experience. And then the market continued to fall. So that 1 year of unemployment turned into 2, and that turned into 3. And the bank account was getting smaller and smaller, and I was getting more and more nervous. And I just remember, just laying in bed in tears going, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do, but I know I'm done with that. I want to do something that feeds my soul. And so, as cheesy as it sounds, when you're unemployed, you have a lot of time. And there's one day I was sitting on the couch feeling sorry for myself, and I was watching Oprah. And I saw this guy from Chicago who looked just like me. He had dreads, he had glasses. It was like I was looking in a mirror. And he was an attorney. And he was saying the same things that I said, like his being an attorney, it didn't feed him anymore. It didn't fuel his soul, but he loved baking. He loved baking cakes. And so he quit his job as an attorney in Chicago and started baking cakes, and he turned it into a business. And here this guy is, we're probably the same age. We had the same glasses. We looked like we could be brothers, is now making a living and making cakes. And I'm like, God, if that guy can do it, I can do it. I was like, I don't know what that is. And at the time I was teaching spin classes, I just kept throwing it out to the class, going like, yeah, this is my background. This is what I did. I love cycling, and it's my goal to give you the best cycling experience here as I can. That's my commitment to you. Lo and behold, after class, people would come to me and say, hey, tell me more about your background. What did you do? And, the people that were asking me these questions, I had no idea who they were, but they're like, Howard Schultz's publicist, or the vice president of Boeing 787, or, the most successful attorney in Seattle, but they're all cyclists. I had no idea. And so they slowly, through questioning, would just ask me these questions and helped me really understand what it is that I wanted to do. And then I went to work for a cycling coaching organization called Cycle University. And I remember Craig came in my spin class one day and he's like, hey, we should talk because you're indirectly sending me clients because you're teaching a bike racing format. So I went to work for Craig for 5 years. And at that time, Cycle U was in the same building as Cascade Bicycle Club. And I met Chuck Ayers, who was the ED at that time. And so one day Chuck comes down to the studio and he's like, hey, Ed, would you like to have lunch with Ron Sims and myself and a couple members of his staff? And I was like, sure. Am I in trouble? What's going on? He said, I'd really be interested in your experience. I know you're a bike racer. And, at that time, Ron was new to cycling and was really good friends with Chuck. And Ron was really surprised at the lack of diversity in cycling. And so he's like, at Cascade, at that time, they were looking at their staff, they're looking at their membership, they're looking at their programmatic efforts, they're looking at just who participates in their events. And it was pretty much north of the Ship Canal and predominantly very, very white, like 90, 92, 94% white. And Chuck was like, we really want and need to do something about this and would love your perspective. And I imagine you are acutely aware of this. And I was like, gosh, I am. And prior to that, I had been thinking about just getting and creating a very simple email list of all the cyclists of color that I knew here in Seattle. Like the owner of Ezel's Chicken, Lewis Rudd, is a good friend. And I met Lewis in 88, riding opposite ways on Lake Washington Boulevard. And we both stopped and was like, God, I thought I was the only one out here. And we've been friends ever since. I mean, that was 1988. And so I had been thinking about creating just this club or just based on membership. We could share ideas and cycling tips and routes, and we could just ride in community. And so I was able to share that with Chuck Ayers and with Ron Sims and say, yeah, this is something that I've been thinking about. And then Ron turned to me and said, hey, Ed, would you like to run this effort? I think about this story and where I was wrestling with the questions of what do I want to do with my life? I know I don't want to go back to the corporate world, the sales and marketing world, and really sitting with that, really struggling with that, and just bringing my full self, regardless, to these spin classes, being vulnerable, being open with people, really getting comfortable with answering the question, I don't know. And I gravitated to the people who would be like, let's explore that. And away from the people who were like, well, you'd better know, you better get a plan. Seattle's this, blah, blah, blah. Why don't you know? And I never got that pressure from my parents. My pressure was like, my parents were like, we have full confidence and faith. We know you're going to figure this out. And we're here for you to help you figure it out when you want our insight. And so coming from a place of just vulnerability and being raw and open and transparent, and just like, this is all I got, this is all I can be right now. And to the point where you have this prominent Black leader in Seattle, King County executive, turn to you and go, and would you like to run this effort, Ed? And here's some funding to help you and get you started. And Chuck at Cascade going, yeah, we want to do this. And all I had to do was say yes. And then I freaked out. But then, I was like, Ed, wait a minute, hold on. You know bikes and business. You've had 20 years with big blue chip companies, Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies, since you were 24. You have that business acumen, those business principles. And so just blend that with your passion for cycling and you can do this. And so, I made a business plan and I'd been I'd been learning more about Major Taylor. And so, and I went back to Cascade and said, here's a pilot project. It's called the Major Taylor Project. It's specifically called a project because it's evolving and it allows other organizations to participate in the project. And the project is to increase diversity in cycling. And we're going to start with youth. We're going to start with youth in high schools. And we're going to start with a very basic program, just introducing youth to cycling, because it wasn't like back in the day. Things have changed. Like back in the day, you'd have these mobs of kids in the neighborhood on BMX bikes and Huffies just, roaming, exploring. And you just don't see a lot of that anymore. And so just reintroducing kids, and specifically in Black and brown communities, is putting it back on their radar. Because, you have those traditional sports like basketball, football, baseball, track, but cycling was just not even on the radar. So in a sense, we had to remanufacture the demand. We had to reintroduce communities, reintroduce youth to the activity, to the recreation of bikes, not the sport. And that was a huge conversation within Cascade at that time. This was 07, 08. Is the focus bike racing? Is the focus mountain biking? Is the focus BMX? And I said, let's just cast the biggest net possible. It's not to turn these kids into bike racers. It's just to reintroduce them to biking and then to ask them, what do you want to do with the bike? And what we found out is a lot of these kids, their world was just home to school, school to home. And then working with the schools, and I fortunately, again, in spin class, had a lot of teachers and principals who were like, you know what, I get what you're doing here. It's more than the bike. And when you're ready, I want this at my school. And so we started in SeaTac and White Center. And through the guidance of principals and people in the district who were like, no, I know what you're trying to do here. This is good. We're connecting with these youth in a different way, in a non-traditional way. We're getting them outside the classroom and they're exploring their community. They're getting their workout as well. There's access to exercise, physical fitness. But the bigger thing is we're expanding their world. And once you expand their world, then that's perspective that they'll never forget. And so my attitude was like, I don't care if they never bike again, as long as they see themselves in the world in a bigger way. And there's a lot of youth who haven't, that we worked with, who stopped biking, but now they're mountain climbing, or they're cross-country skiing, or they're scuba diving, or they're running marathons, or they're like started a family, and, or they literally needed the bike as a tool to get them to UW, or as a tool to get them to Gonzaga or Western or whatever. They just didn't have a way there. And so I had been thinking about this, but I always kept it a frame as like, it's not just about the bicycle. It's about reaching these youth and expanding their world. And why and how I'm so confident in that is that that's what the bike did for me. So I know it's possible. It's like I wasn't a great student. I learned differently, but I connected through sports and through moving my body. And that's where I got my self-confidence. When I wasn't feeling confident in the classroom, I got my confidence from either the football field or the bike, and that allowed me to do other things, to take on other things. And so that's kind of how I framed this. And, after my 10-year stint at Cascade, I went into an environmental nonprofit as interim executive director. And then after that, I went to the Seattle Parks Foundation. I wanted to get into philanthropy and really kind of had the same mindset, access to parks and green spaces in the south end, like the Duwamish Valley, and then north in Northgate, or excuse me, Lake City area, where in these black and brown communities, access to parks and green spaces was really low. So my efforts there were to really help increase access to green space or create green spaces so people, black and brown folks, can enjoy the outdoors. And I was kind of happy doing that, but the bicycle and the bike community and the parks community was really intermeshed. So it kept in communication with folks in the bike world. And the executive director at Bikeworks at the time reached out and said, "Hey, Ed, this was 2018, and said, or 2019, we're creating our strategic plan. A big focus, if not the focus of our strategic plan, is going to be racial equity. And we are creating a racial equity task force of 16 people, community leaders, past staff, present staff, and there were 16 of us. And she's like, I'd like you to be a part of that." And so I accepted that, and we worked together for a year, all through 2019, and then it continued into 2020, right as the pandemic hit, and right after George Floyd was murdered. And in Minneapolis, I grew up probably 4 or 5 blocks from where he was murdered, so that was my community. And so the conversation was, how's everybody doing? And when the pandemic hit, funding at the Parks Foundation was cut because a lot of it was tied to city funding. So I was laid off again. And again, through just being honest and transparent, I said, I'm doing pretty good considering I just got laid off. And that afternoon, my predecessor called me and said, "Hey, would you, given the chance, like to get back into the bike world? Here's what I'm thinking. This is very much succession planning. I've been here 10 years. Your name has come up a couple times. I've got to learn and understand, know more about you and in your work in the Racial Equity Committee or task force." And I was like, just say when. Just say when. And, I also said, I don't want to rejoin the bike world as a diversity, equity, inclusion person. I don't. Because it's got to be a position that has gravity, that has teeth, that has the ability to influence and make change and move the needle. There's a lot of DEI efforts in the past, and especially during that time, that once funding was cut, the DEI effort in that department went away. And that's exactly what happened at Cascade. I went from director of the Major Taylor Project to director of diversity inclusion department, and funding was cut, and then that went away. So I said, based on that experience, I do not want to rejoin the bike world or Bikeworks just as a DEI person. If it's a deputy director role that holds DEI, okay, great. I said, however, it seems to me that your efforts and the organization's mission is DEI. So let's look at if the possibility for me to be a deputy director, I would be interested in that. And so she went away and figured it out and told the board about it. The board pulled me in for a conversation, and I was offered a deputy director position in, May of 2020. And I never would have guessed that my dream job would have shown itself, would have materialized in the middle of 2020. After the start of the pandemic, after the murder of George Floyd, when we had just a ton of civil unrest and recognition that something needs to happen, I tell people it was the perfect unfortunate storm. And I was ready for it. Bikeworks was ready for it because since 96, social justice and racial equity has been the core of our work. So it's not like we had to pivot to focus on this thing that was right in front of us. That is our focus. And then you have another layer there where bikes were deemed an outdoor, socially distant, acceptable activity. So you had the bike world, bike sales went through the roof. And then when bike inventory, bikes under $1,000, when that ran out, our sales went berserk because we only sell used bikes. The average price of our bikes is like $400. We had an abundance of bikes because people were sitting around cleaning out the garage. In 2020, we had over 8,200 bikes donated to Bikeworks. So, the whole industry was going nuts. We were going crazy. then when the industry ran out of bikes, we had an abundance of bikes still available. So our sales, just went crazy. So it was, again, I tell people it was this fortunate storm, and I was ready for it, and I also think that over the years, just asking for what I wanted, remembering that episode of Oprah, and I'm like, no, this is what I want. I want a deputy director position or executive director position in the bike world. And I was very clear about that. Not going into it in a cocky way. I just feel blessed. To this day, I feel blessed that this opportunity has happened. And I also worked really, really hard to make this happen, and that started in 2007, joining Cascade and speaking to the issue, speaking to the what we're doing here. This is about racial equity, and we're engaging in communities of color. And here's why: because you have low access to physical activity, you have high rates of obesity, you have high rates of diabetes, you have discrimination. All those things are barriers that we have the ability to help remove, because these are great kids, these are great communities, and we just need to help remove those barriers and increase access and knowledge. And speaking to that and using that, at that time, Cascade had 17,000 members, using that platform, that 17,000 people, it's like, no, speak the truth, be honest about it, call people in, don't call people out, clear vision of where we're going to go, and ask for their support and involvement in that. And a lot of those conversations evolved very authentically. And that's how I formed a partnership with Group Health. Cascade had an existing relationship with Group Health, and we were engaging them very transactionally, kind of very traditionally. In one meeting, I had read their community health assessment that any organization like a Group Health or a Kaiser comes out with. And I was like, hey, I'm new to this. It seems to me that your areas of priority in your community health assessment are the same areas where we have Major Taylor. I think there might be a way for us to work together. If you look at the same areas, there was like high free reduced lunch, high obesity rate, heart disease, low access to physical fitness or physical activity. And I was like, well, I think the bike can meet a couple of those metrics, physical activity and transportation. And they got it right away. They're like, you know what? We should be partnering with you at a deeper level, because this is preventative. This is a preventative initiative, and we should be fully behind this. And so that's when the relationship with Group Health was transformed, and with Cascade, and it just took off, from there. And again, it was whenever I was in front of Group Health executives or whatever, I was like, here's what's going on in these communities. And you guys know this, we know this, and we have, and we have 17,000 members and a staff of 50, we can partner and really move the needle in these communities, if we really work together and we're clear about the priorities. Every opportunity I had, and to this day, I tell exactly what's going on. It's not to shame Seattle or anything. It's just like, we've got all this tech, business in this town, yet if you look at the graduation rates of Black and brown male youth in Seattle public schools, you look at the graduation rate, you look at the disciplinary rate, you look at the rate of young Black men being put in special education, it's one of the worst in the country. It is one of the worst in the country. Yet we have two of the richest individuals in the world living here. It just boggles it still to this day blows my mind. I feel that no matter when I was here at Cascade or here at Bikeworks or when I was at Cascade, we have a responsibility to tell the bigger story of what's going on in these communities. It's not just the bicycle. It's what's really going on.
I just appreciate so much how real you're being about this conversation and about the place that you were in. And there's a bit of a magic there, a bit of a, kind of you throw yourself out in a real authentic way out there, and there, cool things happen. And it really feel like the emotion of that moment when you've got this vision and then you're offered this, like, why don't we partner together? and that partner is somebody that can really make those things happen. And that's really cool. And man, I could dig into that and spend a whole bunch of time in that, but I want to I, I want to ask about this, and you might need to do a little bit of interpretation what I'm saying, but when you talk about systemic inequality, I mean, these are well developed systems. These are hundreds of years of systems maintaining inequality. And what you just said there was it's more than about the bike. But at the same time, recently was interviewing someone, they called the bike a simple but noble machine. So here you have this bike works in a place where, I mean, what I'm hearing you say is so much potential in Seattle
Yes.
of doing the right thing. And
Hmm.
again, the systemic inequality that is baked into to the area, just like everywhere across the United States. How do you see the bicycle as a tool against such a huge system? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, it does. It happens on a couple different layers. One, at a very, very personal grassroots level or layer, the bicycle is a great equalizer, because it's just you pedaling this machine. What I've witnessed is youth riding next to an adult, and it could be black or brown, white, what have you. And you have a youth in tennis shoes and a t-shirt riding a new bike, and a third of the age of this adult riding, and this kid is like leaving this person behind. Or they're just on this journey together and they're just chatting, and it turns out that this kid is talking to an attorney, and this kid wants to be an attorney, and you've just spent all day riding together, and it's like, oh, well, why don't you come in for an internship? So there's that one-on-one level where you just don't know who these people are. You don't know, and you spend time biking together. You get to learn, you get to know someone at a deeper level. There's that, you establish that relatedness. You are reconnected with humanity, with one another's humanity. And that's when the real conversations and the relationship can take off. So that's on one level. On the other level, telling people about why White Center looks like White Center, why Tukwila looks like Tukwila, why the Central District no longer looks like the Central District used to look, and the history of the Central District, and how the diversity of this city is moving further south or out of the city. And people are like, well, it's a lot of tech has brought a lot of diversity, and we have to be clear about diversity, what that is. It's like African American, Latino, Pacific Islander, Asian, those communities that used to be the anchor of the Central District. It's the Black community here is shrunk considerably. There's only 4% Black home ownership here in Seattle, which again is one of the lowest in the country. And a lot of diversity here has moved further south. And so that's the bigger story. And people are like, well, there really are no racial covenants still in place. I'm like, no, there aren't any in practice. I'm sure there are, but Seattle was a hotbed for racial covenants. And yes, those rules, those covenants have been abolished. They've been done away with. However, the legacy, the effect of that is still there. I watched an interview a couple months ago with this person, and it was a white man speaking to this and said, give me an example of one law that excludes one law against Black people, against African Americans. And the student or this other person couldn't answer, like, I don't think there are any. And he's like, right, you prove my point. And I thought about that. I'm like, no, that's not a point to stand on. There may not be any laws specifically that target me or people like me. However, the legacy of the laws that were in place that targeted me, they are still in effect. They are still in effect, not only systemically, but also in people's minds, And that's one of the hardest things to change is people's minds. So no, there are no laws, but the legacy of that's what is so ingrained, and we're so close to it that we just don't recognize it. Because I mean, there's a reason like Ballard looks like Ballard. There's a reason that the Ship Canal, the north of the Ship Canal, looks like the north of the Ship Canal. There's a reason that South Seattle looks like South Seattle. It's based on race. And just to be that upfront and honest about it, it's okay. Now that we know, let's do something about it. I've asked this question a couple times. Could we do a heat map of where our transportation dollars are spent in this town? Just a simple heat map. And I have yet to get the answer, but you can kind of figure it out. If you go up to the Green Lake area, there's so much green paint and infrastructure up there. I mean, it looks like Disneyland up there. And then you come down here and it's like, okay, got it. I feel that is not only my responsibility, but that's the organization's responsibility to explain or to share exactly why and what is our intention, why our intention is to focus on the South End. It's because the South End historically has been under-resourced and currently is under-resourced. And so it makes sense for us to align our resources where they're going to have the greatest impact. At BikeWorks, we've had a couple of relationships with schools, very great schools, that are very well-resourced schools, and it would cost, 25 to 30K a year to send your kid to these schools. And when I joined the organization, I started asking questions about that. It's like, hey, so share more about why we are partnered with this school. Are we breaking even? And not that it's all monetary. It's like, and not that we have to stop. Let's find that same relationship with a school in the South End that is predominantly Black and brown, or all Black and brown. Are we sharing the same resources with those schools or are with these schools? And if we're not, let's do that. It's not that we have to do away with those efforts. It's just like, let's find the same effort in a Black and brown community with all Black and brown students. I mean, social justice and racial equity is our focus, right? So let's go find that. And let's serve the well-resourced school differently. Let's have a conversation with them and say, hey, since you are well-resourced, let's figure out a way where we can train your teachers to deliver our curriculum. Or let's figure out a way for you to purchase bikes from us, because if you buy bikes from us, then we can use those resources in the South End where they're going to have the greatest impact. And every conversation we had with faculty or administration got it. They're like, you know what? You're exactly right. How do we do this? And it was like, we're not saying no. Let's just realign our resources where it's going to have the greatest impact. And if somebody asks why, it's like, well, have you been to Rainier Beach High School? Have you been to Evergreen High School in White Center? Have you been to Tyee in SeaTac? They don't even have grass. It's like, let's focus on that, So, but once people get that, they're like, oh, right, got it. Because at the core of this well-resourced school, equity and social justice was the core. So they got it. It's like, we're not saying no, it just looks different. But let's take those resources and let's align them where they're going to have the greatest impact. And for us at BikeWorks, it's not the bike resources, it's not financial resources, it's our human resources, it's our staff. It's our staff. Our passionate, expert staff are our most valuable resource. So let's help align their passion where they're going to have the greatest impact to reach someone that looks like them, to model for some from youth in the school, because more times than one, me plus our program director, Rich Brown, plus program coordinator, plus our programmatic staff is 90% Black. And when we walk into Rainier Beach High School, do you know how powerful a message, or Franklin or Cleveland, how powerful a message that is to see two Black men in leadership positions walking in there? And we formed a relationship or partnership with an organization called Young Women Empowered. This organization focuses on young Black and brown women. We formed a partnership with them 2 years ago. This will be our third year. And their program coordinator met us here at BikeWorks. And we're setting up like the summer camp, summer programming schedule with them. And she had been working with Rich Brown, our program director, but she only engaged with me via email. And so I walked into the room to introduce myself, and her first words out of her mouth was like, "Both of y'all are black? My God!" And it was this young black woman was like, "Oh my God, let's get to work," you know. And their executive director is a black woman, but it just changed, you know. It's and for me, I was like, well, if we're going to be focused in the South End, and we're focusing on black and brown youth and black and brown communities, youth and adults, then our leadership should look like that. Not just to look like that. It should be that, because we're going to understand that community and what's in front of that community differently, not better, not worse, but differently than white leadership. It's like assembling a panel of men to study reproductive rights. I don't know. I'm not I'm I'm not a scientist, a lawmaker. It's just like, it's like, would you have a group of runners design a cycling training plan? I mean, there's some crossover, like periodization and efforts and heart rate zones and whatnot, but it's still different. It's still different.
Yeah, I think that's right on, and I love that perspective. And when I think of diversity, to me, there's like this false nod to diversity where you let people at the table,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're quiet, as long
Right.
as, but the value of diversity, to me, I've always thought this is the ability of different people with different perspectives, different life experiences to be able to change, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
alter me.
Yeah.
And so if I'm looking at the cycling world in general, it's not just seeing a mix of races on bicycles, which is, again, it's a step in the right direction. To
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
actively exclude people is a step in the right direction, but we don't really get what is there of value out of diversity until those different perspectives. Some of them can be painful perspectives. Some of
Right.
them can be sharing the things that you might not want to hear. Like
Yeah.
talking about the
Yeah.
condition of Seattle.
Right.
That might be a painful perspective, but until those voices are able to then modify what is going on, I don't think you're really getting what you want to get out of diversity.
No, and you're exactly right. And something you said earlier is just so true. It's just the invitation to the table with the expectation that you're not going to say anything. We just want you at the table. And my God, in my career, I've been a part of that. Your antenna just kind of goes off. You're like, yeah, no, this either isn't for me, or, well, excuse me, you didn't think that I had anything to say. Yeah, if you gave me a microphone, I'm going to say something. It's like, no, what did you think this was? And I actually ran into that while I was at Cascade a couple times, where there was some questions about the resources that were being lended to or given to Major Taylor, and specifically around the Seattle to Portland ride. I talked amongst my team and I said, hey, so here's how it's going to go down. I was like, these kids are going to be on brand new bikes, so they understand what a brand new bike feels like. And why shouldn't they have a brand new bike? They're going to know how the rules of the road, because we want them to ride safely. And they're all going to have Major Taylor jerseys, and we're going to ride STP. And some people are like, well, STP is not all about Major Taylor. I'm like, for these kids, it is. I was like, this is very much a statement. You pick the most visible event of 10,000 people, and we're going to have these youth ready mentally and physically. We're not showing them off as tokens. These kids are going to thrive. And they did. Then the kids would get done, like, hey, can we do that in a day? Here's some people doing it in a day. Yeah, we can do it in a day. You have like, 20, 30 kids doing STP in a day, getting done and going, okay, what's next? And people are like, what's that really saying? It's like, no, this is very much a statement. This is very much a glorious protesting statement. let me let me remind you of why I'm here in this organization. It's so it's not just to be at the table and be quiet. It's like, no, it's to be at the table, dismantle the table, question the other people that are at this table. Maybe we shouldn't have a table. Maybe it should be a circle that we're all sitting around looking at one another because we're all equal.
Yeah, and I think something you said earlier, when you get out on a bike on the road, there is level of equality there, just kind
Mm-hmm.
of baked into you're all sharing the same space, you're kind
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah.
dealing with the same things. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a wonderful thing. What are some of the changes that you would like to see to make an area? There's a lot of people listening to this that aren't in Seattle. But I think that there's in many places there's unfortunately the same story of there are areas that are ignored. So I'm wondering what are some of the things that make a difference as far as if you want to get more access, more equality, engage people in cycling that are normally not engaged in cycling.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the things that can happen from an infrastructure perspective to aid that?
From an infrastructure perspective, more safer places to ride, attention, and also reframing of what a cyclist is or what the bike is used for. It may look different because the people are using the bike for basic transportation, not for recreation. Doing a group ride or a cascade ride is great, and there's also a huge percent of the population that are using the bicycle as basic transportation. So having safe places to ride, not creating additional or separate infrastructure, but bike lanes, greenways, protected bike lanes. It takes an added significance in the South End because, again, you have two of the most dangerous streets in MLK and Rainier Beach in the South End. So that's a structural change. On a personal change level of change is to embed these efforts or an effort like Bike Works or like Major Taylor to embed those efforts in a community with sustainability in mind. So to partner with the community and then stay, just be in the community. And that's something that a lesson I learned from a person on our board now who runs a organization in White Center. And this was back in 2007. She said, Ed, if you're going to come to White Center with this effort, be prepared to stay and be prepared for us to tell you how to spend your money in our community. There's a lot of efforts like this from well-intended nonprofits that will dive bomb into a community for a year or two and then pull out. But that's very damaging. So to change the mindset, change the intent, change the purpose to create systemic change, to actually move the needle, is to understand the community's existing vision, mission, goals, and support those. And it may look different than your nonprofit, but to understand that and understand like how the bike can help the community achieve their goals. And once you have that connection, then the bicycle is like this accepted means of how the community can achieve its goals. So those are the two of the things that I've learned is be prepared to stay, invest in the communities. And the investment is not it's a long-term permanent investment. It's not a 1 to 2 year, 2 to 5 year. It's commit. And that's one thing that whenever we have conversations like this at Bike Works or with possible partners, like we are intentionally in Columbia City and we intentionally have focused on the South End. And it's been a 28-year focus for us. So we're leading by example. We're not saying that we have all the answers. We're just saying this is our focus. We can't be everything to all people. We want to partner and embed ourselves in these communities, in these schools, and then stay. I mean, that's part of the resilient community. And then what happens is we start hiring community members, or those community members become our board members. And so the community members are our staff. And so then it becomes a true community-based community service organization that's there to support the goals of the community. And we're going through a process right now where we're reimagining that as far as like our mission, vision, values. We're starting that work again because it's time. We've been 30 years with that, and it's okay. Does that still resonate? It could be, but just to have that continuous learning and reimagine ourselves and how we engage and how we show up for community. But to me, it's the true investment of the community, and the way you move the needle, the way you create change, systemic change, is to have clear intention that we're going to stay in this community and partner with the community, understand the community's needs, and then deliver on that. It's not very glamorous, I said this at our annual gala. It's like it's the unsexy stuff, and it's everyday real life. If you're in it for the sexy stuff, this isn't it. And there's been plenty of that, and it just doesn't serve the community. It doesn't move the needle. It's self-serving. It's not community serving.
One of the things that's in the community is the Bike Works full service bike shop.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about the importance of that service and having where it is and having that be sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, the shop, we all started in the shop, or I should say Bike Works started in the shop. And all of our youth programming, like Earn a Bike, summer programs, riding programs, all used to be in the Yellow House. We're now in 2 buildings. We're in the Yellow House, the bike shop. We're also in the Hudson building in Columbia City. And so all of our administrative offices, plus our classrooms where we teach youth and adult classes, are here. The warehouse where we process the 6,000 to 8,000 bikes a year is processed here as well. The shop, it serves a couple purposes. One, we don't turn away anyone from service. If you can pay, great. If you can't pay, no problem. Our goal is to get you up and running. We have sliding scale pricing. We've always had that. We just last week rolled out what we're calling community pricing. And community pricing is if the actual price of the bike is this, and then if you want to pay it forward, it's this price. But the minimum price is always our everyday minimum price. And we hold that line pretty hard. Our shop rates, labor and service rates, are the lowest in the city. And they have been the lowest in the city for years. If we raise any prices, it's a pretty involved, deep conversation. And we're very intentional about that. And we don't focus on the shop as being like this huge money maker. That is a unanimous decision at the board level and at the staff level. It's like, the shop is going to do what it does, and we intentionally are that way so it stays community minded. So anyone who comes in the shop is going to go out with their bike repaired and that they're up and running. If they can pay, great. If they can't pay, that's fine too. And so this community pricing allows people to afford a bike. It also allows them to see, what the actual cost of the bike is. And if they can afford to pay that, great. And then if they want to pay it forward, there's a level they can pay as well. Because there's, Columbia City has changed. There's a lot of new construction, a lot of people moving in, but that core foundation of the 98118 area code or zip code, which was at one time the most diverse zip code in the nation, that core is still here. So you have this really interesting blend of people here. A lot of people have moved to Columbia City or moved to Seattle for tech, where they may be able to pay that higher price. And it's our responsibility to explain to them, hey, so number one, thank you. Number two, here's where that additional funding, your additional payment is going to go. It goes to fuel our adult programs. It goes to fuel our youth programs. And here's an example of those youth programs. And here's why we service. So there's an opportunity to educate as well. But the Yellow House, it's like the heartbeat of Columbia City. Everybody knows it. It's great. So the Yellow House, the shop, it's more than just a bike shop. It's a place for education. It's a place for community. It's a place to just come in and check it out. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
How would somebody stay connected with Bike Works and I'm thinking of people all over the country, all over North America. You know, it's an interesting organization that's in the position to be uncovering things that can make a real difference. And so I'm, if people want to stay connected to like what's going on or even go further, I encourage people to do is to provide some support for Bike Works. How would people get connected to that?
The best way is through our website. And I'll be honest, communications is the next step that we're really going to beef up. We realize that we're doing a lot of great state stuff, interesting stuff, and we are so busy that we could do a better job of communicating that to the greater community. And so we are finally searching for a development director that has a communication background. We do have a staff member that's time is split between grants and communication, but we need more. But right now, through our website, that's best. Also through social media. I have to admit, I'm not my Instagram prowess is pretty limited. So thank goodness that staff here, my colleagues, are much younger than me in some cases. They do a much better job. But through our socials, through the website, through our newsletter, our website, just bikeworks.org, we always are posting volunteer opportunities, just ways to get involved with the organization. We have community rides that we do a great job of announcing, and those community rides are free. And that's a really good way for people to engage or just stop by, just stop by the shop, check it out and ask questions. And, a lot of people come through that or look for our classes, like our adult classes or youth classes, summer camps. That's where a lot of people get introduced, to us. We see a much bigger opportunity to share our story and not in a braggadocious way, just like, hey, here's what we're doing. We're doing some pretty interesting things, within different ways of engaging people, engaging the community. And we're pretty excited and proud of what we do. We all have this continuing, learning mindset. We never have the answer. We're always evolving.
So to wrap up here, what are some of the things you're personally looking forward to in your own cycling journey? Do you got some adventures coming up?
Yeah, I have had more fun on my bikes. I have 11 of them. I've had more fun on them in the last 6 years than I've had in my 40 years of bike racing. I know it's because of, like the whole gravel thing and adventure riding. It's just a lot of fun exploring. And I also think that, my perspective has changed quite a bit. Bike racing, especially road racing, can be very cliquish, very elitist. It's tough to break in that. It's not a very welcoming sport. I think stepping out of that for a period of time, then stepping back in, I've got kind of a foot in each camp. So the last couple of years, I've been doing like a lot of the long distance gravel stuff, the multi-day. And every year I ask myself, okay, what do you want to do different? What's going to make you nervous? What's going to keep it exciting and fun for you? What's going to keep that beginner's mindset? So this year I got back onto the track, the velodrome. And I used to do a lot of track racing in the early 2000s for about 10 years and worked my way up from Cat 4 to Cat 2 and went back out there for my first race this past Saturday. And it was a rude awakening. Let's put it that way. And also realizing that, I'm 58 and a friend of mine that I've raced with since the mid 90s, he and Lee, afterwards, he's like, Ed, keep in mind, these people in the category threes now, they're half our age. And so I was like, all right, I'll keep that in mind, so that's, spending the full season on the track. That's the goal this year. And I like things that make me nervous. I like it and I don't like it. But when you're forced to be honest with yourself and you really kind of reassess goals, and like I said, the feeling of gratitude and blessing past 6 years has really intensified for me. I just feel grateful that I can do it. So it's all out of appreciation. But the velodrome, that's the goal this year.
That's awesome. I love that.
I was just talking to a friend the other day about just training and how, and she's new to bike racing, and hearing a lot of comments from people saying, "Oh my gosh, and I think I'm overtrained, or I'm so great just to be taking a break from it." And it's intense. It's emotionally and physically intense, and to be able to step away from it, or to be able to reframe it to where your results and what you do are not your identity. It's really comfortable to be in that space.
Ed, this was such a perfect discussion. I just loved hearing like everything that you had to say and your personal background and what Bike Works is doing. It just, again, I wanted to do something to wrap up National Bike Month in a good way, and I think this conversation was perfect. So thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Tom. It was great to spend time with you and share, and also remind myself that in a few years I'll be 60.
Well, you're more than welcome in the Cycling Over 60 community for sure. So,
thank you for the invitation.
Yes. All right. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
I love that the bike can have such an impact on the lives of people. Ed talked about the bike as an equalizer. Now, I would love to experience riding with a very diverse group of people just to see the power of cycling to make connections. I'm definitely going to try to make that kind of ride happen. I also need to think more about the bike as essential transportation. My bike is a source of health and relaxation and a way to experience the outdoors, but I have plenty of other ways to get around. I need to open myself up to ways that I can help support people who need a bike to simply make it through life. Like Ed, I feel very fortunate that I am healthy enough to spend a bunch of time on a bike, and I have the resources to purchase cycling equipment. But I do need to expose myself more to others that don't have the resources I have. I would love to hear about other efforts to support communities through cycling. Please send me an email or an Instagram message. You can find those links in the show notes. And the best way to share is through the Cycling Over 60 Strava Club. Jump in and start a conversation about the bike as a tool for social justice or anything else you want to share. I want to briefly mention that Road Scholar let me know of a great program they are doing. On June 22nd to June 28th, they have an experience called The Heart of the Civil Rights Movement and Your Family. This event has a multi-generational focus. If you want to know more about Road Scholar, I featured them on the March 14th episode, and I will put a link in the show notes to the event information on the Road Scholar website. Consider contributing to the Cycling Over 60 National Senior Health and Fitness Challenge in the Strava Club. If not the challenge, I hope you find some special ways to wrap up National Bike Month. And remember, age is just a gear change.